Hello everybody and welcome to the very first Smash Live podcast with me, Matt, my brother Andy and a very special guest, Wolfie. Today we're going to be finding out about Wolfie, some of his experiences and asking him some questions to make us all think and obviously hopefully learn something about him and ourselves. So let's start. So welcome everybody. How are you doing today? You doing all right?
Doing really well, feeling really excited that the podcast has finally kicked off and we've got an amazing guest.
I think you're being very gracious, but yes, thank you very much. Thanks for asking.
If I say anything else, you'll leave though, won't you? So we have to be positive,
considering it, well, there's no free hobnobs. I've got a coffee, that's about it. So, but yeah, I'm all good. Thanks for asking.
So to give it a bit of context, I think I met Wolfie doing my musical kind of like career, so to speak, and we met in that kind of world. And one thing that struck me about you is you've lived a very colourful and interesting life, but you aren't somebody that brags about that. And I went around your house and I walked in and there was pictures of all sorts of people, which you'll later discuss. And I was like, wow. And it led to a discussion about your life. And that's why I wanted to get you onto this podcast today. So thank you for turning up. So I'm going to start with, where did it all start for you? Where did you grow up?
South East London. So actually had quite a strict religious upbringing. And so going to religious school, I was actually taught by nuns and things like that. And went through schooling as a youngster, actually really bored with the whole thing. So left school with actually hardly any qualifications whatsoever. So I'm completely self-taught. I just used to stare out the windows, bored by the whole thing. I kind of regret it now as I've gotten older. But I grew up in the southeast, really into my music more than academics, and ended up in Shropshire, having met a girl some years ago from Shrewsbury while working abroad, and that's kind of how that happened.
Wow, so going back to those school experiences, you said, were you one of those young people, like Andy and I may have worked with him, that, and probably being those young people ourselves, that was the dreamer, looking out the window, hoping for something better, dreaming of a future perhaps. So what kind of music were you in and around that inspired you at that time? What was the culture like for you at that time?
Well, actually, I probably shouldn't give away my age, a bit older than you, but I grew up in what was the glory period of what's known as thrash metal.
Oh, wow.
And so the music had evolved across the 80s into the 90s, and it was an era musically that was never going to be repeated, as a lot of music styles actually from that time. And of course, growing up listening to bands like, I know, Slayer, Anthrax, Megadeth, Motorhead, all these different bands. And of course, some of these had some overtones which were very dark, and I'm being diplomatic by saying that. So then being in a religious school, it kind of almost felt like a little bit of a rebellion. And so, grew my hair a little bit, which was a while ago, and greasy hair and spots and leather jacket and mosh.
So growing up, obviously, in that religious school, did you feel that you could fully express yourself at a young age in terms of what you actually liked?
No, I think the music was part of that expression.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't do it in school, because you just got to remember things, again, this was a while ago, but, you'd have punishment in schools there.
Yeah.
It wasn't a case of, like, Saturday morning detention. You get hit. And so
we are going back a few years, aren't we?
Yeah, cheers. But yeah, we are. Actually, in primary school, a quick story. I was terrible. I was always fighting all the time in primary school. Until I went to secondary, and all the kids were just a lot bigger, and I was just really intimidated, and so all that stopped.
Yeah.
But in primary school, again, being a religious, it was a Catholic school.
Right. Okay.
And so I'd always end up in the headmaster's office for doing something, whatever it was. And he would sit behind this big desk, and you had this massive painting of the Pope behind, right? So you've got the Pope staring at you, the headmaster staring at you, and then he'd find out what you've done, and that's when problems started, because the Pope was on a sliding door, so the Pope would slide away. So the Pope's not watching anymore. And behind this door was a massive row of canes And I mean, you think about it now, that guy go to prison for that now. And what he used to do is, it was complete mental torture. He'd get a cane out, bend it, very rarely knew my name, so she of course called me boy. And so he'd bend the cane and then crack it on a desk. And no. And then he'd do this a few times. So which are you like? And then he'd find the right cane and then go, right, bend over, boy. Crack. And you just, and that's how it was. And so, things kind of changed, and you actually got really quite scared at times with these things.
Was that primary and secondary school?
That was primary.
So what was your so when you went up, so just thinking back now, obviously Andy and I go round and we're booked for keynotes and training, and we talk about, therapeutic interventions, and we're talking that's very punitive and behaviouralist kind of punishment and shaming.
Yeah.
What was it like being in and around that school environment when, with that strictness, did you develop those kind of sneaky behaviours as pupils? Was it like keeping everything kind of...
Remember, your brain hasn't matured yet. You're still very young, so you didn't know anything else. Yeah. You're brought up with, in that environment, surrounded by fear. That, with people, with it, the same things. I know you use the word fear there, but it was. But whatever I did, I wouldn't do it again. But I then find something else to do, so I'd end up back and watching the Pope disappear before he comes back again after you've been beaten. And so, there would be scars on your body from these things. But secondary school, no, already I think things were changing. But you'd still get a clip round the ear, And so I remember the headmaster then, and he didn't. I was so insignificant, he didn't know my name either. And everyone appropriately called him, Pig, Mr. Smith. Everyone called him Pig, and by which time I was now sort of about to sit my exams, and so at that age, like 15 or something, plenty of spots, long greasy hair,
listening to Anthrax,
and Megadeth, and so of course I stood out, probably for all the wrong reasons, and so he come over to me and, boy, get your hair cut. Yes, sir. How's your study going? And I said, well, it's terrible actually. But I said, yeah, it's okay, sir. And he said, good. Pray to God and you will pass your exams. I went, yes, sir, I'll do that. And that's what I did. I prayed to God, did no study whatsoever, and failed them all. Wow. And so that was it. That was my divorce from all of that then, and I left school as soon as I could. And
so you literally took that advice on. So I was going to ask you,
well, it was tongue-in-cheek, I just didn't want to study.
When was the first moment you discovered thrash metal? Because for me, music, I've got my own musical journey, but today's about you, and was it Top of the Pops? Was it on the radio? Was it Friends? Was it, how did you get into that? Because that informed your whole identity. You said the long hair and stuff.
Well, it did, and I think you find that a lot of people into that culture, whether it's thrash metal, hip hop, whatever. If you actually identify with a musical style, most people are proud to identify with that musical style, and there's no right and wrong in all of that. I don't say I worry about people who don't have music in their life. I don't say I worry about that and keep me up at night. But I just think it's a sad place if you don't. And so, although a lot of people say the music you listen to is like really noisy. Yeah. So, it's noisy music. I enjoy it. I like drum and bass, noisy. I like some opera, again, noisy. Where that's always kind of appealed to me. But no, that sort of style of music was never on radio. Maybe the old Friday Night Rock show years ago, but you'd never find it on TV.
So where did you find it? Because that's quite a niche.
It was real niche. So I think there was only a few of us, and we once you got the leather jacket on, the denim jacket with all of the patches. I used to have a Daffy Duck on the back saying Mosh, which I hand painted myself with Anthrax, and which were the originators of the word mosh to my knowledge. And you hear pop concerts now, people say, "Oh, get in the mosh pit," and I don't think they really knew where it came from. But you're very proud of that kind of identity. There was only, I think, 3 or 4 of us in the whole of the year, if not the school. But in those days, people would throw things out their windows as we get spat at and all sorts of things for listening to this really bad music.
But what I get a sense of is you have a strong sense of self and identity. I mean, we've all watched films like The Breakfast Club where they amplify those characters, and one of them has that sort of look.
He does, yeah.
And he's the
I've
rebel.
not seen him for years, but I kind of remember it.
Yeah, and he's the rebel, and I'm imagining you, Wolfie, as that maybe at school, but the strength of character to go to school every day and go, no, this is my identity. Because you do find, we found it in schools, that the majority of people at schools, they want to form groups, they want to fit in, they want to be sheep. There's very few people that go, actually, I'm going to stand alone. And those people that usually do, who know who they are deep down and love what they love, they used to get ostracised and bullied.
Yeah, I wasn't really that bothered about fitting in, and I used to get bullied because I was so spotty with greasy hair, and I was also very overweight, and so I get picked on constantly at school. And that's when I started weight training, so listening to metal and weight training and things like that, and just to try and turn things around a little.
And obviously with our work, we always ask the children, who was that role model in school? Who were your role models growing up? Were there any teachers that were maybe the difference? So it would make you want to go to school and maybe feel that, do you know what, I get a sense of warmth from them. Did anyone stand out to you? Were they different in their approach?
An adult, a teacher, a coach, anybody?
No.
No,
I don't. I remember my English teacher being a very nice lady. I mean, that was the only qualification I got through at school, and show my age now, because it was the last year of O levels for GCSE.
Wow.
And I actually got a B at O level in English literature, because bizarrely I like poetry. Who knew? And other than that, GCSE geography. Well, I got an unclassified in that. I think if you spell your name right, they give you something. So I didn't get anything for that. And the other thing which I learned at school, which was really helpful, is I'm a qualified touch typist. Yeah, so I could be having a conversation with you now and still typing away, but not about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So and that was traditional, because those days it was typewriters and BBC computers, which are a monstrosity when if you ever see them now. I'd probably be on an antique show, and nobody would want them then.
But don't they still use those kind of people in courtrooms?
Well, I don't know. Maybe you've been in court more recently than me, but I don't know.
No.
Last time I was in court, I don't remember that.
Representing young people.
But you said that no one really made you feel any different, but you said she was a nice person and you passed that. Well, that's the only thing that you passed. So there must have been something.
Well, I think I speak with her, but no, I was just more interested in my music.
Yeah.
To be honest, and I just wasn't bothered about learning. And say the typing thing was purely because I was in, diplomatically word this, I was in a special group. Okay, because I didn't study.
Yeah.
And so I had this option in one bracket, was either physics or typing. And physics teacher, being diplomatic, wasn't very nice, and all the girls did typing, so I thought, I'll do typing. And after 2 years, I was the third fastest speed typist, and it was the most useful thing I've ever learned. So
you better put that on your CV, by the way. Hopefully it's on your CV, third fastest and qualification in speed typing.
Yeah, well, that was back in 1981. Yeah, so I'm probably a bit slower now.
I mean, before obviously Matt moves on, what I want to say is absolutely love the fact that you're not scared to go, I was my own person. I didn't care. I wanted to kind of follow what I wanted, because we constantly say this to children: be a sheep, not a shepherd. Be your own person. Yeah. Oh yeah, be a shepherd, not a sheep. Yeah. Edit. And we're constantly saying that: be your own person, don't be a follower. If you see something wrong, do not follow that. Do the right thing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure, particularly on young people right now, academically, and a lot of those qualifications is because, when I was at school, you would be offered a few choices, and that was it. And then maybe you go on to sixth form, whatever. I was already gone by then. But there's a lot of pressure to have that says you must have these qualifications, you must do this. And I've always just thought, well, sod that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be told that. I want to create my own kind of path to do the sort of things that I want to do, and wasn't going to let a lack of academics do that. Years later, setting up my own record label, I knew nothing about the music business.
So you talked brilliantly about school. So you're 16. Wolfie's now 16. The real world is beckoning. What did you do after school?
Well, I was really interested in my weights, so I got a Saturday job working for a sports company in Charing Cross in London, a sort of very famous brand attached to bodybuilding, still are. And the only other interest I had was in photography. And so it's not like the cameras that you kind of see here now. I say very respectfully, photography was a completely different art form then, because this was all pre-digital. So you're shooting on film, 35 millimeter, 2.25, 5.4, 10.8 format cameras, which, so, you know, it wasn't that long ago in the scheme of things, but the camera between the shutter and the film plate would have a bellows, and you'd have to measure the bellows to work out the aperture of the f-stops to try and, you know, whereas now you would say, well, it doesn't matter, we'll just put it in Photoshop. Of course, you didn't have those things then. So it was a completely different art form to what it is now. But yeah, I did photography for a few years, and the photographer I worked for, he had clients even, such as, you know, Coots Bank, Harrods, major brands, and you know, I think, well, God, I was only, 15, 16, and I mean, he was charging £750 a day then, which was a lot of money. Yeah. So he was a really pro photographer.
Yeah, where were you living?
Well, that photographer, he was based out of Farringdon, which is North London.
Yeah.
And I was still in the southeast, so it used to be a train and a couple of tubes to get to work each day. But I loved photography, and went through a training scheme where you didn't need any qualifications. So again, he kind of taught me. Spent a couple of years there. Went to work for another photographer in Soho in London then, which was a completely different Soho to what it is now. And so, you know, kind of really interesting times. And I was always more interested in my weight training, so I then went to work for this gym company full time, and then I managed a gym in Tottenham in London when I was 19. But it was all full of champion bodybuilders, this place, and a couple of the gladiators from the TV show used to kind of train there, and that's why I'm called Wolfie.
Go on, tell
Wolfie
us
for
why
gladiators, you know.
What, the bad guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, because Wolfie was one of the former gladiators. I mean, God knows how old he is now, but so I understand that he's still a cage fighter in New Zealand, and knocking around young guys half his age, you know. So I used to have long hair all the way down here, and for years being an old rocker, and then when it started receding, and this guy I was working with, slap head, long curly hair. You look like that Wolfie from Gladiators.
Oh, okay.
And it's stuck ever since. But that's how that came about. But running this gym in London was, you know, a real eye-opening experience.
And mentally for you, you know, myself, I'm a huge fan of going to the gym, keeping fit, keeping active. Was that huge at that time of your life as well, having like a sort of discipline of going to the gym?
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's perfect, because I was in the gym then every day, you know, sort of 5-6 days a week working. And so I'd go in early in the morning before opening up, do an exercise session, squeeze something in during the day if I could, if it wasn't so busy. And so, yeah, it really became a lifestyle. I didn't drink for a year and a half, 2 years, something like that, because really it's different now, but really kind of focused on it, yeah.
Were you like at peak, would you say, looking back, like peak fitness in that early kind of part of your life?
Fitness, I'm not so sure about.
I
think actually, I was definitely a lot bigger.
Wow.
But the actual fitness side came sort of years later when I went into a different line of work.
So tell us about that, because obviously you're in this gym. How did it then? Because when I met you and we started talking, some of the pictures around your house alluded to the fact that you've worked alongside some really big names in the bodyguarding and close protection industry, and so you're working out every day. You've got, you know, the great physique and stuff. How did that happen? How did that journey end up going into that realm?
So once I moved up here, I had a couple of jobs, and then started running a gym in Wolverhampton. Okay. And at this gym in Wolverhampton, there was I kind of put it around that I was interested in that line of work, in studying the close executive protection business, you know, more commonly known as bodyguards. I was really interested in that, put it around. I was looking for that, and a couple of guys came over to me, excuse me, and said that, you know, we're about to start our own close protection course, would you like to jump on it? And it kind of went from there. And so I did this course. I loved it. I really enjoyed the threat analysis and the threat assessment part of it, the criminal abnormal psychology aspects of the business. So I found that fascinating, that here I was all these years later actually studying academic things, but for a purpose this time, because actually I really wanted to do this job. And so it was then a big choice as to whether do I now join the armed forces to really pursue this work, or do I try and do it from the civilian direction? And so I spoke to people I knew in the armed forces and those who had left, and both said different things, but I decided still to pursue the civilian direction and just really sort of knuckle down and just start reading and start studying and get involved wherever I could.
But it's funny, isn't it? Because, children go to school from the age of 5 to 16 and they're kind of forced to study subjects. And if you're not interested in something, it's almost impossible. But obviously later on in life, you find almost why, don't you, things that you're really interested in. And studying becomes like you're so hungry to learn then, aren't you?
Yeah, and like mathematics being a case in point, my parents used to pay for me to have extra tuition, which was a lot of money for them to pay at that time in mathematics, and I just couldn't do it. But yeah, I can go to a darts board and I can chalk a darts board. So the brain can do it, just doesn't want to do it for that reason. So yeah, all these years later, and sort of now being in sort of my young 20s, so I say all these years, but in the 10 years difference between leaving school, 8-10 years, I'm studying. But it was never going to give me a qualification. It was just to assist me in learning that craft, that field craft.
So I suppose most civilians encounter with people who may have been down the gym and built themselves up. My first encounter with people that might work in that industry are bouncers, people that work the doors. Yeah. And something that I've always noticed was some of them were really good and some of them weren't. They would antagonise you even before you got to the door, especially being a young man full of testosterone, and you can probably attest to this, or you're not wearing the right trainers, get out. And very overtly aggressive, it's kind of like hit first, ask questions later, and not caring about the implications of that. I mean, I ended up in hospital once because of an altercation with a bouncer, which we won't go into. But from doing all of that stuff, so the outside perception is, you just need to have big muscles to be work in that industry. What do you think is one of the most important attributes to work in that industry that you learned? Because you alluded to it, maybe. Yeah,
I mean, I don't agree with that statement at all. That's even more so at the close protection end. Yeah. That if you've got to rely on your brawn, then chances are you may have made mistakes at that point anyway. Some things sure can't be planned for, but it's always, this is where you do the job. Yeah. And if you don't have that, and if you don't have common sense, then you're never going to succeed in that business. It doesn't matter how many black belts in various fighting arts you've got. I don't care what size you are. I don't care what sexuality you are. I don't care what your religious beliefs are or what your politics are. Can you actually do that job? And going back to the old days, which you're referring to, which alludes to the time when I used to get beaten in school. Everything's regulated now. We could probably talk about that subject all day long, about the rights and the wrongs of that. But in the context of this conversation, those things are regulated. So the encounters that you had before where you got hurt, and I don't want to know what you did, but let's just take it for the context of this conversation that you were in the right and he was in the wrong. Let's just take that.
There's a bit of that coming from Matt Smith.
That may be the case. That may be the case, Andy. But what I would say is that the confrontation you had now has actually repercussions. Okay, because you have to have a license to work in that trade. You get a criminal record. And let's say that you wanted to pursue that door supervisor for what he did, whether you were in the right or in the wrong, but if you wanted to, he gets a criminal record, game over, that's it. And I would put it to you that probably when this thing happened to you was probably pre-regulation, I would think.
Looking back 2004?
Yes, it will be, because regulation came in just after that.
You think of the cost of, because that guy and the team that he was in probably, they didn't talk, they were just reacting on what they thought they saw. And you look back and think, well, that was a cost to the NHS because I had to actually have an operation. So when I met you, it was really refreshing, and you've actually written a book about it all, haven't you?
Yeah, I've written a couple of books on
that,
the bodyguarding business.
Yeah. I just thought, this is what these, because like you said, I know women that have gone into that industry as well, as you would have known.
Yeah.
But is it a predominantly male-dominated industry?
I think my former company, which I ran for 17 years, we trained over 1,000 people over the years to get their licenses. And I was saying, I'm not too sure whether I got my license on me. So, yeah, I do. So to have these little bits of plastic that say that, one, you're free of criminal conviction and that you're qualified to do the job. I would still always argue that, because the training for this is what I call basic. And there's a big difference between being an operative in this business and being an operator.
Right.
Massive difference. That says you're an operative. That doesn't say you have the life experience or skills to be an operator, or necessarily you have that. So that's a completely different thing. But from 17 years of running my own firm, say we trained over 1,000 people for their licenses, had a very distinctive client list, I think, for quite some years. We trained a lot of women throughout that period, and we actually advocated that this. It still is a male-dominated business, but the playing field has changed. The client base has changed, and so it's a lot more of an open space than what it used to be. And also, one of the things that's important to mention is one of the very rare careers that sometimes the older you are, the more employable you can become.
Right. Is that because you're talking rather than?
Yeah, one of the things that I'd like to say, excuse me, a client I used to work with, and he said that one of the reasons why he liked working with me so much was because you talk people down. You're very passive. You don't. I'm not being paid to fight with people. I don't want to get engaged in those things, ideally.
But isn't it interesting when we compare that to how we deal with behaviours in schools?
Yeah.
So Andy and I go into schools along with our staff team, and the escalation of some pupils, not all, because they're dysregulated or triggered in school by whatever. We've all probably been triggered in school in our lives. So what would be the best piece of advice for you to give to a room full of teachers or educators who might be dealing with young people that are angry, who are at a point where they might explode at any moment? From that kind of world, because I think I do see a little bit of a crossover. I'm not saying we need bodyguards in schools, but I'm saying we need to perhaps take an element of the skills that you were giving people to staff without restraint, because I don't like restraint young people. So what would they be for you? What would you say if you had that platform?
De-escalation.
How?
Okay. Teachers, for me, it's not my business, so I might be speaking out of turn.
No,
I may not be qualified for the opinion, but you've asked me the question, so I'll share it. Teachers are teachers. I don't think they're counsellors. But I think that it has changed significantly that young children today, and adults in various works they're going through, and like programs I was watching last night, where the stress levels upon everyone, whether it's economics or whatever it is, mental health, just is it just because mental health is more attention's being paid to that today? Was it always there? What has changed? And there's not so much of a stigma attached to these things now, but I would suspect that people who are involved in the teaching business now are also almost part of the counselling care profession as well, because this almost seems to be an epidemic of unhappiness. And to try and de-escalate these things surely has to come from listening, but at the same time, going against what I said about academics, because I never listened, or rather I never studied. They still have a job to do. But I think getting involved in confrontation, going back to when I was a kid, if there's ever confrontation, I just get disciplined for it. That's gone. Those days are gone. That's never going to happen again here. And so if you've taken that out of the scenario, and you've got a lot of kids and things we've seen in the news quite recently where people are fighting back, and it's a very difficult task. It's a very difficult task now.
It's funny you should say that, because I think in all the years we've been supporting children, that's combined like 50 years, we've never engaged in confrontation. Now you hear things, kids are going back next week into schools and that's going hard, not smile till Christmas. And for us as a service that has engaged just within Smash Live over 1,000 children, for us it's all about relationships. It's about how we greet them, they're micro moments in the corridors, and that is going to help in them moments of de-escalation, emotional intelligence. And it's funny because I was out in Manchester on Sunday for a friend's birthday, and I don't drink a lot, and we're walking from pub to pub, and I think 90% of the pubs, the bouncers were very aggressive. You're not coming in here, too many of you. And I just thought, if you just flipped that, to lads, I'm really sorry, where have you been tonight? Or just a little conversation, it could have just calmed things down, because you could see the unrest with a couple in the group that probably did have quite a bit to drink. And I just think it's all in the approach. And we haven't got, realms of qualifications, we're not counsellors, and we say this to teachers, but you're interacting with these children every day. And that gives you a chance to build those relationships.
I agree. Here's another question, and it's a big question because it's a buzzword, I think, for a lot of people. And I've been asked to go into schools to talk about this stuff, and I refuse to, because I think we need to fully understand why some young males are gravitating towards some undesirable role models. But do you believe that there is a lot of toxic masculinity within that industry?
I don't think I believe it. I think I know it.
Where does that come from? Is that all the films that young lads have watched? I want to be like Rocky. They're aspiring to be big without actually working on their brain power. It's like I see a lot of people down the gym going, hua, hua, hua. But are they actually working on this? Is there a gym for this that they can go to?
Do that noise again, because I've never heard that in the gym.
You don't need to do that again. We got it. There is, and going back to the work we're saying, this is very much about here, which is why a lot of people can't do that role, and which is why it's seen as quite an elite line of work. Sure, we can all get qualified to do that, and legally speaking, you should.
Yeah.
But it's the life skills and having an enormous amount of common sense that enables you to be able to read situations and to be able to hopefully to protect not just yourself, of course, but actually other people, which is what you're being charged to do. Why is there... Well, you say about the testosterone and sort of the male-dominated testosterone. I think, and from my years of experience, is that when you're being put in a corner or on a pedestal, whatever it is, you're saying, right, I am here in this role. And so there's almost this... I need to prove that I am here in this role. There's just a massive difference between somebody working as a door supervisor in the place over there, and then working in a more discrete role in executive protection business. In the executive protection business, predominantly if you're working with corporates and the such like, you are not looking for confrontation. You are not looking to necessarily attract attention. Sure, if you're working with an A-lister and you're at certain events, that A-listers know they're going to be there, there's a crowd to work, things like that, and that's a different thing. And you only really get that in the celebrity side of the business. But in the other aspects of the business, it's a completely different thing.
I was going to ask you quickly, sorry Andy, I know you got a question. So when you saw the attempted assassination on Trump, did you look at that as a news article through the bodyguard close protection, kind of like where did it go wrong? Because there's been videos put up about like where did the close protection security go wrong? Yeah. And I know that you went on to be alongside some pretty heavy A-listers, which when I saw the pictures in your house, I was like, why are you standing next to that person? Why are you standing next? And you were
It's
like,
a very
Is it
effective
Madame
stalker.
Tussauds?
no, it wasn't. No, they were genuine, and there was a letter in your house that I won't say who from, and I was like, wow, Kev, this is amazing. Like, and you're from, you know, yeah, you were born in London, but you've lived in Shropshire your whole life, and that was inspiring me to think, wow, you can think big, and you can reach for the stars, you know, literally, but doing a job that you felt passionate about. So how long did you do that in the top echelons with those A-listers? How many years? And was, without naming names, how did you keep a hold of your mental health in that time? Like, because that's a lot of pressure, knowing that the celebrity media machine is on those celebrities. Anything goes wrong, there's thousands of fans. We know what they're like now, and if we've ever been out and we've seen a celebrity, people around them with their phones, like, ugh. And how do you deal with that? And how did you deal with that yourself? So how do you take care of yourself mentally in that industry?
Well, I think that's probably why a lot of people in this industry don't want to work with celebrities, because
Why?
it's because of all of everything you've just said.
Right.
And inevitably, well, for me, the word celebrity gets bandied about too much these days. There's a massive difference between somebody who is a genuine, almost certified A-lister, and the predominance of what we read about in the press, what I refer to as Z-list, possibly C-list at best. Yeah. So, but they're still regarded as celebrities. But with working with genuine A-list people,
Talented people,
and it does attract, you know, just an incredible amount of attention. And I kind of liken it to the same as how it is for police officers now. That everywhere they go, they are filmed. Everything they do, they are filmed. You can't speak to me like that. Well, we have to work with the same parameters of law. The only difference is we don't have a warrant of authority. We don't have a warrant of power, if you like. We have a license. It just says I can do the job. I have the same rules of law as both of you.
Yeah.
But the difference is, if somebody steps out of line, I will speak to him in a way that I think needs to be said. Yeah. But everywhere you are going, everything is filmed, everything is shared, and you've got everything to lose rather than everything to gain. Because I think of a chap I used to speak to who ran something called the STTU out of Los Angeles, which is a specialised tactical training unit, and he described this business some time ago to me as 97% boredom, 3% sheer terror. And that's, all these years on, is still probably an effective way of describing that business. Because it is it's the mundane and doing everything, living somebody else's life.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it can be just like that. Things change and you have to react, and you work with what you can work with.
So it's very stressful, I can imagine. Their worlds were very small, with obviously TV crews and people, the public obviously recognising them. So again, how did you deal in that high pressure situation? Did you have a team around you that you had to manage around those celebrities?
You're making a presumption that there's a budget, first of all. Everything has a cost. And so it's just because somebody is A-list, first of all, it's who's paying for the service. It's very rare it's actually the celebrity. And then in this situation, there can be a difference between the client and the principal. The principal is the one that you always protect, but in this case, that principal may not be paying for the service, that's the client, so there's a difference. So the client might be an agency, it might be who's ever a production house, it might be a film studios, it might be whatever it may well be. And then it comes with limitations. So if you are working, so you mentioned what happened with Donald Trump recently, and so when you're the Secret Service, which have a great deal more of a budget than what everyone else has on Civvy Street, irrespective of your background, you're still working the same parameters as the law, as I said. But there's three different aspects to the job. There's one working something called residential security, so that's the base that you work from, might be the home, the hotel, whatever it would be. Then you have your security advance party, they're the people who go out ahead, which is going back to the Trump situation. It's those guys that would have seen all the potential vantage points. They would have planned all of the routes in, the routes out, blah, 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 where there are choke points, all those different things. And then you have something called the personal escort section, the PS, and that's the group that protects the principal. And then you may have the team leader, the TL, may also be called the BG, the bodyguard, within that. So that's a full operation. Well, how much do you think that costs?
Loads.
A lot. Yeah, we don't need to name a figure.
Well, if your daily wage is X amount, and then you times that by...
times that by, okay, so we want 5-6 guys to work with, want a couple of guys doing the advance work, and we need a few guys still at base.
And we need to...
Okay, so your overheads, you're now in what, $5,000 upwards a day at least.
Crazy.
And I'm probably being frugal there. And that's just your overheads. That's let alone feeding them, clothing them. Or not clothing them, rather feeding them, accommodating them, I meant to say.
Naked bodyguards.
Well, that would definitely be a press story. So
take the spotlight off the celebrity, I suppose.
But they wouldn't
things
want
like travel expenses and that as well.
Someone's got to pay for all of that.
Yeah.
I'm not paying for that. If I'm doing, if that's my job, and if you want me to be there and you want me to go for there, well, that's an overhead. So I shouldn't have to pay for that.
So how many years did you do that kind of like high-end kind of like celebrity work?
So I worked 3 years freelance.
Yeah.
After doing my course. Then I ran my own firm for 17 years. First 3 years were really tough. And then we broke into some really good work. Right. And so that went on for 17 years. I then decided to step away from the business, but still consulting for companies, high risk companies in that business. So I still do that now.
Brilliant.
So I still hold the license. You don't need a license to consult, but just in case you never know what's going to happen, and I decide to go back to that work, I'm not sure. But I did step away because I wanted to do other things.
So that's good for us to know as well, because when I go into, bodyguarding at mother care and things, we can consult with you, with stuff like that. But here's a question though, because we obviously have a team with Smash Life, don't we? And it's hard managing people. How did you find that? Managing different personalities, different needs, well-being, as well as running a business.
Difficult. I think when people are in the public eye, they often have a personality.
Do they live up to that personality sometimes?
Yes.
Did you, I won't name the name, but you did tell me one story. Was there a time, and I'll ask it, was there a time that you quit because I assume that you have to have an agreement with the person that you're protecting, that look, if I give you instructions to keep you safe and you don't obviously follow those instructions, you take things into your own hands. Was there a time where you just thought... Throughout all of the years, I only ever walked on one job. Wow. And what was the reason?
That was my client.
Right.
The reason was that it was not beneficial to me in any way because this particular client was very famous. This particular client was having all sorts of issues that would put them all over the press and did happen. So I actually rang my own office and fired myself because I didn't have the temperament to... I knew what was coming. So I actually sacked myself and put other people in who actually had a better temperament than me. And sometimes, this is a very important thing, you need to know what your abilities are. No one wants to be a weak link in the team, ever. So you've got to be honest about what you can and cannot do. And then if you can't protect yourself, then you sure as hell can't protect anybody else or their assets or what their families, their pet dog, whatever it is. You've really got to take a view, not just snatch at the work, you've got to take a view, can I do this? In the same way that a lot of the guys that we trained then went to work in hostile environments, work in hostile theatres, is a completely different test, a completely different occupation than working, say, the streets of London or,
Do you think most of those A-listers that you worked with, do you think the majority of them understood the risks to them? But do you think some of them ignored those risks despite the advice given by yourself? Because we're sometimes saying to young people, we're giving them advice and they're not at the age sometimes, or the brain development, where they take on that advice and they have to make those mistakes themselves. Did you find that a lot, Ray?
Well, don't ever make the presumption that a celebrity's going to listen to you, is the first thing, and not just a celebrity, but anyone.
Is that an ego thing, or is that like a...
It's because, not necessarily, it's because they've got other things going
other priorities?
You're involved with a motion picture, you've got an awful lot to learn, there's a lot of pressure on you. So I see it from that side. You've got 150 million budget riding on this motion picture, and you are the pivot. And if you get that wrong, it's going to be an awful lot of people very unhappy. So that's a lot of pressure on that person's shoulders. So I get it. And so it's really important as part of that executive protection role, is not to terrify the hell out of them and say, well, I don't think we should go down that road. There's a good chance something might happen. No one professional would ever speak like that. You just make the decisions. Don't mither that person with what you're doing. Just do it. If you think you need to inform them of something, do so. Don't ever be negligent. If you think there's a threat escalation, you may speak to others involved with that person before you speak directly to them. So again, for the same reason you got 100 million, 150 million budget on a picture. I don't want to make that person uncomfortable. So you then have to make a judgment. Do I tell them or do I not? Because if it affects the whole thing, and then once they come back, then nothing happens. And they say, well, it was the security guy's fault because he scared the hell out of me. So I couldn't get the best of it. So it's one of those businesses where you've got everything to lose, everything to gain.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I watched something about a security guard. You might know him, actually. And he was Liam Gallagher's security guard back in 95, 96. And he quit. Well, Liam fired him. But Liam actually tried hitting him, goading him. And it reminds me of that celebrity that you were talking about.
I watched something last night and it was on a podcast.
Yeah.
It was on Instagram.
And I just thought, wow, because he was young and the guy was ex-special forces or military.
Yeah.
And I've read his book and it was an incident in Paris where Liam fired him and said, you're fired now. Did you ever have people try and provoke you that were your clients?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I've certainly never had that incident that you're referring to with Gallagher there.
One question I've got regarding it is everything's about being prepared, isn't it? And if there was a concert or a big event or something, would you almost like have a bit of a get together, brief before with that particular person and go, this is what might happen in this is what we'd like you to do,
if the budget allows it?
So
you would have done all of the various recce's. If you go into hotels, you know who the concierge is, if they've got in-house security, whether venues, who's in charge of security there, and you kind of liaise as part of the role. If the budget allows you to do all those different functions. Right. So if, again, we're just talking about celebrities, we haven't talked about religious leaders, we haven't talked about foreign royalty, we haven't talked about people involved in corporate business. All those things have different ways of doing things.
Can I ask an obvious question?
Maybe
if I was like a religious leader or one of those people you referred to, I'd be wearing things so people wouldn't recognise me. Would that not be the first kind of point that you'd, I don't know, disguises, which I know a lot of people do go out and wear. Is that not a de-escalation thing straight away? So it's not like, hey, it's me.
I would personally wouldn't want to say to somebody of a particular faith that I don't think you should dress like that, because I think that's kind of what you're implicating.
No,
and
I'd say more celebrity. I mean, obviously, in terms of the faith leads and stuff, of course, they might not have a choice.
Yeah.
But in terms of some of these people, you do think you're bringing it on yourself. You're going out there and it's like, hi.
Yeah, It's in the same way that because somebody's a celebrity, it's now we're going to ask you questions about economics, we're going to ask you questions about politics, and what do you think of this, what do you think of that? Where's their qualification?
Yeah.
Just because they're in the public eye, they're given a platform to express their views. Yeah. Sometimes it's security that has to pick up the consequences of that.
Yeah.
So if you ever ask me questions I don't think I can answer, I will probably say I can't answer that. If there's something I don't want to answer, I will probably say I don't want to answer that, or I've forgotten.
Wow.
It's funny you should say that, because someone told me at the weekend they know someone else in close protection, and a very, very famous celebrity apparently puts a mask on. And that probably just shows how things have evolved all over the years. They've got a mask they put on to go out in public.
Yeah, I read
normally walk around.
I read something that Taylor Swift's been touring. I don't know if this is true or not, but her security put her into almost like a speaker cabinet or something. That's how they go into the venue, by wheeling her in. I don't know if that's true or not, but I read that somewhere, and that's not uncommon. That sounds extreme, but sometimes you have to take measures. And if your main risk is members of the public wanting to get close, or they want an autograph, they just want to, with one celebrity that you saw, people just wanted to touch him.
Yeah. But it's like you alluded to it, a great point there, like these people who don't have the choice of how they dress because of their faith, because of their duty.
Yeah.
Like, it must be quite tiring for them as well, being out in the public eye and having to think, gosh, do you know what I mean? And the age of selfies, I mean, I'm sure they don't get as much as the Hollywood people, but how to deal with that. So, Kev, I was going to ask you this. What was the best piece of advice that you've been given in that industry, but also life? And I know that's a big question, but what piece of advice would you give to somebody thinking about going into that industry? That's probably a better place to start.
Yeah, that's a big question. I'm not sure the answer straight off the top of my head. Well, first of all, anyone can go into this industry now.
Yeah.
And yes, it is still seen as an elitist occupation, and that's quite right and proper. As I say, there's a massive difference between an operative and an operator. But to getting qualified as an operative, if you're both free of criminal convictions, you can do that. In the British qualification, you need to have a decent knowledge of reading and writing of the English language.
Yeah.
If you can do that, there's no reason why you can't even apply. And you'll go now through 3 weeks of basic, and including that is basic first aid qualifications as well, first person on the scene qualifications. So, and that will give you 15 points accredited to a degree level by this level 3 qualification, which is what it is now, which is what I just showed you was in my back pocket. So that is a recognised qualification. And going on from there, what I would say to anyone who's very interested in working in that business, sometimes, as I already mentioned, being the older you are can actually be the more, because hopefully you've got life experience. It's very rare to be my age and getting involved in that business at 20, whatever it was, 22, 23, very young, to get involved in that, because your life experience, you think you know it all, but of course you don't know anything. But don't ever try and be an expert in everything. Try and find your niche, whatever that may be. And what I mean by that is the academics of the business. So, being an expert in threat analysis. Big difference between risk analysis and threat analysis. So risk analysis is something which you'll find on any form about, the wires in the studio, whatever. And well, for insurance reasons, we've got to say, oh, yeah, I might trip over a wire. That's not risk analysis. Well, that's not threat analysis. That's risk analysis. Threat assessment, threat analysis. Something has happened. Something is going to happen.
Right.
What do we do then? And that's where the criminal abnormal psychology aspects of the business is fascinating. So I need to think like them. What would I do to get to them? And you've got to try and get into that mentality. There's a presumption made that you know what the risk is, what the threat is, and where it's coming from. Whereas, of course, we see events every day where you just didn't know that was going to happen. Terrible events have happened over the last few weeks, which no one could have foreseen.
It's good to relate that back to schools, though, because we can all make risk assessments, residential home schools, educational settings, but threat analysis, what do we do when it does hit the fan? What is the contingency plan? And it is about saying, where are the safe spaces in schools that we can take people to when they are de-escalated?
Yep.
And allowing money set aside so we have those spaces, because believe it or not, some big educational places don't have those spaces. So we're constantly saying, what is the backup plan if a child kicks off? And it's a great point to bring it back to that. So thank you.
Well, I would go on to say that in this business, you have something called SOPs, you have your standard operating procedures. And always when I'm planning something, even if it's in phases, operations always go in phases.
Yeah.
But I always plan the phase backwards. So I want to be there at the end of the day. Right, well, how am I going to get from there to there, that bit? That's a phase. and I'm going to do it backwards. And then by doing it backwards, hopefully you don't miss anything. And that was the way I was always taught, and that's always the way I've gone. When you look at something backwards, it's like picking up an artwork and then turning it upside down, you see it in a completely different way.
Wow, that's great.
So I look at threat and risk in the same way, and you've just got to be completely open-minded and think of eventualities, and that there could be implications of actions by you or by them. And so that's kind of how I look at things.
Thank you. So how did you go from that industry to then running your own record label?
I was drunk. So at one point, the close protection business was doing very, very well, and first time in my life actually probably had some money in the bank and things like that. But being in that business, everything can go wrong, as I've already said, very, very quickly. So I wanted to do something completely diverse, and I always loved music. And I was drunk. I was at a bar, and it just suddenly came to me. I said to me, "I'm going to start my own record label," and he just went, "What?" "Yeah." And that's what I did the next day. And it was the most stupidest and most expensive thing I ever did.
What was it called? What was your record?
Wolfie. Wolf at Your Door Records.
Wow.
Bit of tongue-in-cheek with the Wolf at Your Door with the close protection business.
Go on, Andy.
So have you had letters from the actual real Wolfie, trademarking, he's probably after you, isn't he, surely? Does he want a bit of this record? Well, he didn't want, did he?
Well, I don't think he knows where I live.
Yeah.
But how did you get into that industry in terms of you set up a record label, but then how do you go about signing artists? How do you go about the distribution and promotion? Is that something you had to learn?
Yeah.
So on the job?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was introduced to a very good lawyer. Lawyers are up there with my most disliked people. I think they're modern day criminals. I think they're modern day highway robbers, and they seem to have come a work in need in life. Apart from anything else, they're just not my favourite.
Is that because of the amount of money they were charging?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so you just saw it as a business.
I can see that. So, my son, my daughter's going to pursue law. So, okay. And what aspect of law? Yeah, personal injury. Oh god. Yeah, right. You walk out this door and you fart in the wrong direction, you get sued now. Thanks to people in the law society, not the law society, but people working in the law sector. So, not my favourite. But however, I was introduced to this really good lawyer, and bless her, she taught me a lot of the mechanics of the music business. And so I had to study contracts, recording contracts, producers agreements, management agreements, music publishing agreements, all to do with music copyrights, and how you can exploit music to license to film and TV.
Right.
Computer games, massive. And, it was a real learning curve, and made a lot of mistakes, signed quite a few bands that probably I shouldn't have, and made decisions passionately rather than professionally.
So with your heart rather than with your head.
Yeah. Exactly. And, as a consequence, certainly in this area, I was really quite disliked, and for a little while, and kind of saying, well, yeah, he signed these bands, but then he sacked them. I sacked them because you weren't good enough. And you had no place being on a record label. There's nothing wrong. If you want to go and play in the local pub every weekend, that's sound. Great. But should you be on a record label if that's as far as you want to get? You've got to make a decision. Do you want to make a living from this? And if the answer is no, or I've got this going on, I've got that going on, I'm involved in a divorce, I've got 4 kids, I've got everything, fine. But like any career, it's no different. You've got to be focused on these things, and it's going to take you away from home. And if the answer to all of that is, I don't think I can make a career out of this, or I don't want to, then you have no place being on a record label. The actual record music business has changed so much over the last sort of 10, 15 years. And the actual role of a record label is now, do you actually need one? What is the role of a record label? Even to say records, young kids will be going, well, what's a record?
Yeah.
What is that? Well, it was this piece of vinyl, the size of that. Yeah, I can get 10,000 tunes on a little device like this now. So you're not actually dealing with records. You're not dealing with physical music as such anymore. Buying CDs is antiquated. Paying for music is antiquated. Now, this is a really serious thing, which is why I've seen so many really good bands crash and burn.
People want it all for free, don't they?
There's no money in music anymore.
Yeah.
No.
There's no money in music. So you've got to say to yourself and be smart and say, okay, if you want to make money out of the music business, if you want to make a career, there are various ways of doing that. First one is live and performing live. Well, again, going back to the local pub, what's it going to pay you? Can't make a living from that. Yeah. So you've got to make sacrifices. But eventually, hopefully, when you're giving your music away so much, the people will like it, they come and see you. So live. 2 is merchandise. And with, say, metal, like my record label, metal, hard rock, punk, where people involved in that want to buy the merchandise. People involved in, say, I mentioned like hip hop earlier on, want to buy the merchandise. A lot of genres don't necessarily, but in the particular genre I work with, people want to buy that merchandise. They want to support that band. So, live, merchandise. Third one is publishing, and that's when it gets actually quite complicated, and that's working with copyrights. And it comes down actually to not necessarily to the band, but actually the composer, the songwriter. And it's the songwriters that get a lot of the major credits and the financial returns, which is why some band members are so much more wealthy than the others. And that person may not be necessarily the vocalist. You know, it might be the bass guitarist or maybe the drummer or whatever it may be.
And that causes tension, and
it can cause massive tension, but that's the way it is. They wrote the song, you didn't. So they are entitled to that return.
I think Coldplay have done a thing where each member, they had a band agreement where they get paid equally. I think I heard about that, which is lovely because I can imagine 1 or 2 people come up with the initial idea, like we talked about, and it's whether you drop your ego for the sake of everybody else in that team, because let's remember, you can't go out and perform that without the bass guitarist, without the drummer. They might not be as talented, and I'll put that word, talented. I've got friends who are amazing musicians, but they can't really write a song.
Yeah.
And I've got songwriter friends who are amazing at writing songs, but they're rubbish at performing live.
And that's why you also get people who are involved in songwriting that are actually not involved in any bands whatsoever. You get professional songwriters, and maybe something you've never heard of, but you know, financially. And often the gate returns of major stadia, you know, 3%, something like that, gets taken straight away on copyrights, you know, of all of that take.
Crazy.
And so there's actually a great deal of money in it. So for a young person trying to make music, or trying to make a living out of music, so there's your 3 things. Live, merchandise, publishing, and music publishing, and working with your copyrights. That's the 3 things, which if you can get 2 out of 3 right, hopefully you're somewhere there.
So you did the music label. I'll say music label rather than record label. How did you then go from that to becoming an author?
Well, I did my first book in 2006, and then I revisited that 2010. So
what was that on?
That was to do specifically with the close protection business. So I wrote 2 books on the bodyguarding business, which was, if you like, a how-to do the work, it wasn't talking about clients.
So, why did you decide to just go, I'm going to write a book? Was that the inspiration from that English teacher? Was that I can write, I have a creative outlet here?
No, because I didn't know that I could write, and I think the jury's still out on that, but it was just something that actually, because we had the training arm of my company, that actually was a very good promotional tool, that you'd say to somebody, it's going to cost you £2,500 to get qualified to come do a training course, or do you want to spend £20? Read about the book first and make decisions whether you think this is the right lifestyle for you. And you've got to remember that business, it is a lifestyle. It's not just and it monopolises everything.
I remember when we first met, I came around your house, and you were, if you want to hold that book up, the one that you probably talk about, you were writing that book.
Yeah.
And I remember you were on, I think it was a laptop or maybe your typewriter, I can't remember it. But I remember thinking, Kev, what are you doing? You were like, I'm in the process of writing my whole book. And then when we chatted about it, creating that world, creating the characters, and then the time, you're like, this is all I'm doing. I'm literally waking up, writing, waking up. So what I want to stress to anybody that wants to get into any creative outlet is the discipline that you need. Like people say to Andy and I all the time, don't they? You two should write a book. To be honest, how much time do you have to dedicate to it?
How long's a piece of string? So, first of all, you've got to make a judgment call. So this book, which
tell us about it.
It's called Mildred the Crazy Cat Lady. It's a story set in Shropshire. It's first in the series, and the sequel was out in November this year. But because I now have investors, so there's a lot of pressure on. So I'm writing now pretty well full time. And so the sequel was just approaching about 100,000 word mark. This book's 140,000 words within it, but I've still got a lot to go with this sequel. So,
and where can you buy it if you wanted to buy all these books?
Unlike some of the things I've written, where an author says available in all good bookstores, not all of my stuff is. With this particular book, Waterstones, Smiths, Amazon, of course.
That's brilliant.
So you find it.
That particular one, how long did it take to write that?
Well, this book took too long because 6 months was the first draft, and that's actually, most authors will tell you, for a book of that size, it's pretty quick. By the time it's published, it's 13 months. Then it'd only been out a couple of months, then there was the lockdown. So the book, I decided to make some changes on that, so I scrapped the whole book, removed it from sale. So if I see first editions out there, I often buy them because I don't want people to read them. Because I then brought in a new editor, I then brought in a new proofreader, and over a process of over a year, the whole book was, as I say, scrapped and completely. You might have a first edition.
Going to buy it back off, you know.
That's going on eBay.
The whole thing was scrapped and completely rewritten, and the second edition was so much more superior to the first. That's why I do want people to read the first. But I brought in an editor, but by the time the manuscript came back, I was still really unhappy with it, and so then had to bring in some other people as well. So the process all took too long, but now it's full-time work with the sequel.
And what was the inspiration behind that book? Where did the idea come
Don't
from?
know. It was something that, where I was living at the time, there was this lunatic cat that lived next door. You know, I've got dogs, so I've to write something about cats.
Hold it up.
Was kind of a little bit left field, but this lunatic cat living next door, and I thought I'm just going to write a quick children's book about this cat. I just thought, and I've never written children's material before, but I just thought, why not? How hard can it be, right? Yeah. And it was all very whimsical and lovely, and animals talking to each other, and the world's lovely. And then just probably working 20 odd plus years as a bodyguard, just this whole dark world came from nowhere. So all of that was scrapped, completely rewritten. And it's now a young adult to adults book. It's not for young children now.
So who did the front cover? I'm just intrigued with things like that. I think it's lovely.
So the award-winning artist does a lot of his graphic novels called Lyndon White, and I've worked with Lyndon for quite some time. And then on the back there's a different artwork, different artist, Dan Butcher, who I also still work with as well. So they're both completely different artists, and I work with both of them to do different things because there's a whole merchandise range to do with the secret society that features in this book, which is fundamentally what it's about.
So before the books even hit the shelf, editor, proofreader,
expensive.
Yeah, wow. And one thing that struck me just in our conversation today is you're not scared to strip it all back and start again, or have a dream, have an idea, and just throw yourself into it.
You've got to remember, if you're going to do this, it's like being a presenter of a TV show. It's like being a composer of music, and it's like you created this amazing artwork, or you think it is, and you spent a couple of years on it, and then somebody comes by and says, "Well, that's a load of crap."
It's like writing a song.
It's really offensive.
Yeah,
it's really offensive. Yeah. And but when you do that, you put your head above a parapet.
You do.
And you're then throwing yourself at the mercy of the public, because they are your critics, they are your judges.
But I've got this observation about that. I think there's doers and there's observers in life, and there's people that will get off their backside and do something. And even if I think, and I go and watch people, music, whatever, or buy a book, and I don't think it's probably something that I thought it would be, I'm not then going to go online and be like, oh my God, I thought this was rubbish. But there are people compelled to do that for whatever reason. but they've never done anything themselves in their life. So I turn that round now, and when we work with young people and even adults, I'm saying, why did you feel the need to write anything? Like, if you go to a hotel and you have a bad experience, why write anything? But I have seen the reviews of your book and they're really good. So well done. And it's like writing a song or standing up and saying, look, this is what happened to us as children, and we're going to go and talk about it, and we're going to promote, you know, men talking about their feelings. We need to question these educational establishments and say, actually, there's a different way, because we felt the old way, and I'm sure you felt the old way as well, in extreme ways. And this is what I mean. When you say something that's different, especially coming from a small town like the town we've come from, it can ostracize you. People can judge from afar. Oh, God, stay away from those two. But well done. It takes that strength of character. It takes that person who was at school, maybe wearing that trench coat, going in with his hair down. That's the inner child, isn't it? That's probably powered you along throughout this journey, with that you thought, I'm going to do it my way.
It sounds like a horrible cliche, but better to have tried than not tried at all. I mean, it is a real horrible cliche.
But people
it's
get
kind
trapped
of,
in,
but it's kind of true.
Yeah.
But people get trapped in their little...
You know, and I find with authoring, that most people will procrastinate, and they'll kind of say, yeah, I've got this great idea, and particularly when I do book signings, and, you know, every day somebody comes and says, well, I've got, you know, the saying is everyone's got a book in them, right? And you two definitely have, right? But that's what people say. They've got a book there's a book in all of us. And it could be because we're all individuals, we all think differently. You know, if we all thought the same, it'd be very boring. We'd have too many leaders or too many followers, you know, whatever it might be. And so... you know, it is a process, but people will procrastinate.
Yeah.
And this is what comes back to what I was saying about academics holding you back. Because you either don't have any qualifications, or we have lots of qualifications, but so?
Yeah.
And so I meet so many people who say, yeah, I've got this great idea, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that. Well, how far have you got? Well, I haven't started yet. So you're procrastinating, and at some point you've got to have the bits and pieces to kind of say, do you know what, I'm going to try this. But at least you're going to say at the end of it, I tried it, and yeah, okay, it was no good. Yeah. But at least, you know.
I think people are scared of failure as well, and massively. And I think, you know, it's obviously not about us two today, but I think our childhood led us to, we know what it feels like to have nothing.
Yeah.
So if Smash Life failed or whatever, we know, do you know what, we're still breathing, we can go again. And it seems you've got that mindset where you're like, okay, the music label, it didn't work out, but I know I've got the skills, I know I've got...
Well, actually, I'm going to correct you, the record label did work out.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
I sold it. Oh. Yeah, so I'm going to correct you there. No, at one point, there was a record label with a band who have just reformed called Mallory Knox. We had iTunes Album of the Week, that was 80-something thousand downloads. We licensed music to Sony, Def Jam, Radio 1, Formula 1. That we actually regular radio rotation, and so I'm just going to pick you up on that one. So in fact, I sold the record label, so it didn't fail.
I stand corrected.
You stand corrected.
A public apology. But
you'll need close protection now.
Yeah, I know. But what I love is the fact that you will move on to something else with the same enthusiasm, and you know what skills have you needed that has kind of worked for you throughout all of these different projects, things that you've done that have carried you through.
I mean, and hopefully you improve as you go. You know, so it's kind of, you say there's been some nice reviews for this book. There's also been some that are not. And
how do you deal with that, Kev? Because like I'm a musician and I write songs, and sometimes I put stuff out on my platforms and I'm like, oh, I love it, but then you'd always get that idiot that like, that's rubbish, and it's being that resilient. Like, well, I've had to change my mindset and not care so much about what other people think, and I've had to become like, well, I don't care, I love it. And if
you do have to be a bit tough,
you have to, and did that inner resilience, is that built over time?
Well, yeah, because it has to, because actually, you know, it's really hurtful sometimes, and it would be a lie to say otherwise, you know. So it's like saying that we all listen to different types of music, and people will like your music, some will, some won't. I don't think it's possible to write a perfect book, and what appeals to some doesn't appeal to others, you know. And you go on to like websites like Goodreads, which is huge in the States, and you'll see literary classics being absolutely smashed to bits by various people. And so, but has that person ever written themselves?
What's that famous quote? Is it Brené Brown? It says, "Unless you're in the arena getting your backside kicked, I don't care about your opinion," something like that.
Do you know, I hadn't heard that before, but yeah, and there is a lot to be said for that. And so yeah, as it goes on, you have to become a little bit more resilient to it, and like a comedian getting heckled, sometimes you just have to deal with it. But the most important thing is, are people actually liking what you're doing as well? And if they are, then you're halfway there.
But I'd also say this point is, does it make your heart sing? Writing books, does it make you feel like you're doing something that you're passionate about?
Well, yeah, but I also don't want to get a proper job.
But that's what I mean.
Yeah,
it's a vehicle to not go.
The thought of me working in an office and putting a suit and tie on every day now, did that for years, and I can't use the appropriate language, but I'd rather go and do something to myself than go through that hell again.
I think more and more people are feeling like that finding that inner entrepreneur within them. I mean, Andy and I, if I look back at what we were like at school, we never dreamt of having a company of our own, doing what we do, doing great things like this. We're living the dream for us, but it's our dream. One thing I was going to ask you, going on about dreams, what are your dreams for the future with the book? I mean, what's your vision for it? Because I'm intrigued, because you said the second one's coming out soon. Tell us more.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
If you can.
I'm not sure. So yeah, fundamentally the story's about secret society, but I have a real interest in ancient Egypt and ancient Egyptian beliefs, and so, which was a really macabre belief system, that the thought of death must have been terrifying, their thoughts on the afterlife. So you're trying to bring some of that back to life in modern day times, and you have to be very, very careful, because I'm taking genuine world events and putting a twist on it. But when you start dabbling with people's passions, particularly that would have been a religious belief some time ago, you can be really careful with how you write those things and not to inflame. And so the actual central character, Mildred, who gets involved in this secret society, she starts developing powers, shall we say, and ultimately it's this big clash between good and bad forces, and all set around here. And so I'm still not sure whether there's going to be 5 or 6 books in the series, but you're constantly thinking about, well, where's this going to go? What's its natural conclusion? And so you're always having to think ahead. So yes, I'm writing the sequel at the moment, but I already know book 3, what's a lot of the things that are going to happen in that. And so I have a real interest also in the Knights Templar and some of their alleged treasures and things like that. So there might be something happening with those things too. So,
is there any things that you need to kind of stimulate that imagination to write, or do you need to be in certain like atmosphere or environments?
Yeah, the only thing is I very rarely write at home.
Yeah.
So I usually have to take myself somewhere, whether it's just a cafe or whatever, just a place away from home. And strangely, even, I think at some of the local pubs around here, in the evening I might rock up with a laptop and people look at me like I'm a weirdo, because they're all playing pool darts, whatever, getting drunk, doing whatever their thing, and there's me in the corner just tapping away, and I can just switch off.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And,
I've seen it.
And I can just do that, but it's because I struggle sometimes to write at home. Home is my home. Everywhere else is a workplace.
Yeah.
And so you're taking yourself there. And a lot of writers do exactly the same thing. You need to put yourself in a mental place where you say, right, I'm here to work. It's like you getting on the stage. You might think some days, I can't be asked. I just don't want to get on that stage. I don't want to be a performer this evening. But you put yourself on that stage, and I presumably you say, right, this is my place of work, and this is what I'm being paid to do today, whether I like it or not. Same with me. I will go somewhere else, and I will sit there, and I may think for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, looking very strange, like I've got no friends, but I don't care what people think.
Great.
Hopefully I'm doing something. And if you want to look at me like I'm a weirdo, if you think I'm rude, or he's arrogant, he don't want to talk to us, I don't care. I'm just there. I'm minding my own business. Is what I'm doing. I just might look a bit weird sitting in the corner of a busy pub, just tapping away on a keyboard. But I'm hopefully I'm doing something with that time, rather than having yet another forgettable night in a place. I'll do that at weekends.
So, okay, we're going to draw to a close in a moment, but I was going to get you to think, it is a big question, and I asked it before.
Oh, are you going to repeat that question again?
Best piece of advice, but because Andy and I, we speak to groups of young people, we do the one-to-one mentoring and stuff.
Yeah.
From your life experience, what piece of advice would you tell a group of, say, secondary school children and adults? I know that's a big thing to ask, but what piece of golden nugget would you go, this is what I would try and take away from this today from me?
It'd probably be the wrong thing to say in school, but don't let education define your life.
I don't think that's the wrong thing to say. I think that's brilliant.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you guys work in that environment. I don't.
I think we're geared towards everyone. GCSE, they're going to really shape your world. You're like, no, they're not. And you can go again, or you can find different directions.
I get the initiative. I get why people and teachers and people who have influence over young people say things like that.
Yeah, it's currency in the modern world.
It's pressure, but so what? Life's pressure. When people say, "Oh, life's too short to be doing that," well, life's the longest thing you're ever going to do. So I would just say that don't let it define you. If you fail something, so what? Don't beat yourself up about it. Either say, I don't care and I'm going to move on, or I'll redo that again. Just don't, otherwise it'd be like an actor going for a casting, not getting the role. Well, I said I'm not doing that again.
Do you think that's come back with age, though? Because as a young person, there's quite a lot of shame associated with failure.
Is there?
From what we see, it's currency, isn't it, that you've got to be successful at a young age. So we do have these challenging conversations.
I'll tell you what, I'll bang on about something here now then, which goes to a certain type of music particularly, where the main protagonist, shall we say, are rolling over Ferraris and Lambos and things like this, and then they'll get a wad of notes out and they'll go all like this, and it's kind of saying, these are material things, and this is what you need. Well, you don't. That's shit. You don't actually need those things, as nice as they may be. It doesn't define you as a person because you drive a nice car or whatever it may well be. I think that's a really bad example to set. I remember being in the States years ago and buying a pair of pumps, trainers, whatever you want to call them, and there was a little tag, very well-known brand, and it had this person who was an NBA star, but I don't watch bars, that's why I didn't know who he was. But instead of saying what he'd achieved within that sport, it says, he's now got X amount of minutes and he owns over 50 cars. And so I looked at that and I thought, I've actually just paid for these. Kelly's got 50 cars.
Yeah.
It's like years ago working at a very expensive hotel in London, a very famous one. Afterwards, I went to the bar, had a drink, and the guy behind the bar, he obviously got the cut of my jib straight away and thought, this guy ain't got a lot of money. So I said, I'll have a bottle of beer. Oh, surprise. And it was still then, it was like £7 for a tiny little bottle in this expensive place, probably about 2-3 times that now. But I was looking at the rows of scotch, because I'm a scotch drinker, I love scotch, and there was a couple of bottles right at the back on this top row, which I didn't recognise. And so the guy clocked it and he went, see that bottle over there? And I said, yeah. Do you want to smell it? And just like, I don't think I've ever had anyone be able to say, do you want to smell my scotch? I don't think that's ever happened. Anyway, so he got this bottle, all right. So he brought this bottle over and it was a very rare Macallan. And anyone who drinks scotch will know what that is. In the Bond films, it would be like Bond has a 50-year-old Macallan. This was somewhere past that.
Good evening, Mr. Bond.
Yeah, well, I think you'd have a few of these, you wouldn't sound like that. But anyway, well, you definitely wouldn't because he only told me the price. So I sniffed this bottle of scotch and it smelled like scotch. And he went, go on then, how much do you reckon a measure? I was like, yeah, all right, it's a rare Macallan. Well, I'll ask you the question. How much do you think a measure?
Okay.
So we're talking a shot.
A shot.
£80.
No, more than that.
Well, this is it. This shows what I know about.
£1,000.
It was £1,000 a measure, and this was some years ago, and half the bottle are gone. Now, I'm going to use this as the same example as the guy on the trainers with his 50 cars. And I turned around in this hotel and I saw a gentleman of a certain age with ladies of a different age.
Right. Is it Mr. Bond?
And well, Mr. Bond could afford to stay there, mind. And I just looked at this bottle of scotch and I thought, I think that's really pathetic. £1,000 a measure. You're only buying it because it's the most expensive drink in the bar.
Yeah.
And you're trying to impress.
But people put value on these things.
What, for that much?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I know, I get that. But my point is that this wasn't like going to a Scotch event. This was just a bottle on the bar mat. And my point of view is, say, I'll tell you what, I'll spend 50 quid on a shot, which is still a lot of money, and the £950, I'll put that in the charity box. The guy who's got the 50 cars who's bragging about it, how many do you need? I'll tell you what, have 5. And give the value of 45 cars to somebody else. And these are the sort of things that I would say that, for me, grind my gears a little.
Well.
And, you know, I think there is so much in the media and there's so much in social media that says, this is me, I'm doing this. I don't care. This is what I had to eat, so well done. This is what I'm driving, so well done. This, you know, I'm good looking, so well done. And it's the wrong message, and it's all about materialistic things. And there seems to be a pressure put on that. So that comes back to a long-winded way of answering your question about don't let academics define you, and try not to be mentally manipulated, to be a follower like all of these other people with all these different things. You don't know what's gone on in their life. Father might have been a bank robber, that's why you got that money, that's why you can afford those things. You just don't know. But for me, they're not role models. And that's what I can offer to answer your question.
Well, that's why we got you on. Thanks, Kev. I think, Wolfie, sorry. That's why we got you on today, because it's about young people listening to people that are around them now, in their local area, that they can aspire to be and look up to. People are always saying to Andy and I, we need more male role models. Well, hello. You're a role model to me, you know, inspire me. You know, I've thought about writing a book. You know, I've spoken to Andy about it and we're on that path, and hopefully that path will grow. So last one is, where can people find you? Where can people follow you and keep up to date with your future projects?
Okay, well, ideally not show up at my home address. Really, the first thing.
We're not going to
Let's make that clear.
On a serious note, how do people follow you? They've listened to this today, and keep up to date with your personal projects and books.
Yeah, okay, so Kevin Horak is my name. Everyone calls me Wolfie, Mr. Wolf in the closed section business. The authoring of this particular book is K.S. Horak, that's H-O-R-A-K. Right. And the reason for that is all of the characters are female, bar one, and he's quite strange. And Mr. Franks is quite a strange man. And the initial readings were coming back saying, well, this book's quite female empowering. So I was like, okay, great. Might want to hide it's been written by a man.
Okay.
And so that's why
Clever.
it's K.S. Horak, and also because I've written adult material as well, which if you have to have a certain sense of humour to enjoy that. They're not available at all good bookstores, and so and generally it's just K.S. Horak, kevinhorak.com, and so there's all sorts of bits and pieces on there.
Brilliant. As well. And the last one from me is I had a conversation with a young person recently, and I said you were coming on, and they wanted to ask a question which I've tried to remember, and I think we answered it already, but they were like, to work in, like to be a bodyguard, does that mean like I have to start going to the gym now? I think the question was from them was, what's the most important attribute if you wanted to go into that industry that you would say to get ahead?
Yeah, okay, I think we did cover that. I mean, first of all, it's academic now. You do have to, I don't say, like, don't contradict myself saying don't let academics define you, but with this business you've got no choice now. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you do have to do that, otherwise you're breaking the law, potentially it's imprisonable. So yeah, you if you work in the security business now, you need to have some form of license.
But you've answered it really well, because I often say to young people, find out what you want to do in college, If you have the passion, you find it in, say, year 8, year 9, year 10. Some people don't find it until they're older. Andy and I didn't.
Same.
But if you know, and you know the plan and what they're asking for, it's like a computer game, isn't it? Get ahead. Know what you're going to school for. Get those qualifications. Get onto the next level of life.
Yeah.
I just want to say a massive thank you for you to coming on today, and thanking Andy for being here also. Is there any last questions or thoughts that you have?
No, for me, just inspiring. You know, obviously I don't know you as well as Matt knows you. And Matt did tell me yesterday he's bringing out Matthew, the crazy cat man book to rival your... No, I'm really joking. It's just been lovely to speak to you, but also I think a big thing that jumps out for me is you're not scared to start again. You know, when you do something new, and I think you've relied on a lot of skills that you probably got growing up that has led you to where you are today.
It's difficult to define it because I don't know what the skills are. You just get on with it. And you know, so I'd be useless at wiring a plug. If the washing machine doesn't work, I don't know.
But if you
struggle to even work it sometimes. But you know, there's other things. I think we all have our thing.
Well, you know, from going to school, you know, like you said, standing out, being different, so to speak, well, you need a certain resilience. You know, you need resilience when people are kind of hammering a book, you know, when people are being very negative about you. I think you're doing, we throw that word around, but, you know, for me, you are a resilient person and you're not scared to be yourself, and I absolutely love that. So I want to say thank you very much for coming on and inspiring us.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, and thanks to you for watching this episode. I want to give a special thanks to Harry, the videographer who's filmed this, and Kev, who's been behind the scenes today, and our fantastic guest, Wolfie. Hi everybody, if you've liked what you've seen today from the Smash Live podcast, please like and subscribe to the channel. We'd really appreciate it to help grow it and inspire more people who may watch it and get something from it. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.